Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far and welcome to today's video, which is going to be probably the most highly requested video ever throughout the history of my channel here on YouTube. You guys have been asking me to talk about my swimming career, my failed Olympic dreams, if you will. That's a story time we're going to be talking about today. I've been putting this off for years. It's something that I never speak about really in my personal life. It's something that is very painful for me to talk about, but I also feel like very healthy probably at this point to talk about. So I'm really glad that you guys kind of pushed me to talk more about this on my channel, because I feel like there's some healing that needs to be done. And I love to heal along with you guys, so maybe it encourages you to kind of talk about something painful in your life and the feelings that come up. I'm sure whether or not you've been involved in sport in your life or not, I'm sure you'll be able to relate to some of the feelings and experiences in another area of your life that we're going to talk about in this video here today. So without further ado, let's get started. So as I said, a lot of you guys have been asking me to talk more about my swimming career. For the entire existence or life of my channel, I've been getting questions about this. I know I have kind of mentioned that I was a swimmer, that I was an international level swimmer, that I had dreamt of going to the Olympic Games and I didn't ever make it. And I've kind of mentioned this as well as my career working in elite and Olympic sport that followed my own personal swimming career. So I've mentioned it here and there whenever I've done kind of sporting themed videos, and that being my background, but I've never really talked about my personal journey and all of the ins and outs. And I know for a lot of you, if you're interested in sport, it's probably quite fascinating. And if you are not interested in sport, you've never been involved in sport at a high level or just aren't that familiar with it, I know there's a lot of intrigue in certain areas from that perspective as well. So how I've done this is I did a call for questions on my Instagram, because whenever I say what is it that you want to know about when it comes to my swimming career, you guys always just say everything. But that was a 20-year-long journey for me, so that would be a very long video, okay? So I asked you guys for specific questions so that I can know exactly what it is that you want to hear, what you want me to talk about. So I have my whole list of questions here, and I've tried to kind of group them into the beginning, how I got started, then like the middle bit, and then the very disastrous, painful brutality of the ending of my swimming career. And then we've got some really fun sort of random questions that don't really fit in those categories at the end. So I'm going to kind of go in that order. There's nothing here that I don't feel like I want to answer or don't feel comfortable answering. So I will be answering every question I was given. However, a lot of people ask the same question. So in that case, I've just picked the first one I see. So starting us off is Sretej. I've definitely not pronounced that correctly. I'm so sorry. So your question was, did you come from a family of swimmers or just find it on your own? I had a couple of questions along those lines, like, was my family sporty? How did this all begin? So no, is the short answer. My parents, no one in our family really had ever been a swimmer specifically. How we got started is simply my mum and dad just wanting my sister and I to be safe around water, on holidays, in swimming pools and things like that. So we started swimming lessons just like anyone else, my parents just wanting us to learn how to swim and be safe in water. There was no sort of intention for us to go and be Olympians. That's not how it started at all. It simply started with our parents just wanting us to be safe and being able to physically swim and be safe around water. Quite quickly when we moved, I was born in London, so when we moved from London to Devon, we joined a club. And that's when I was 4 years younger than my sister. We left London when I was 4. So I really only started actual lessons then when we had moved. And almost instantly it was very clear that I feel like a lot of the things I'm going to say in this video are going to make me sound really big-headed, and I'm not trying to. I'm trying to just be like matter of fact. And it was quite clear immediately in even doing my widths lessons that I had a lot of like ingrained talent, so just inherent born talent for swimming. I remember vividly, my first kind of memory of swimming is that my mum was banned from my swimming lessons because if she stayed there and I could see her, I would cry but if she left or I couldn't see her, I'd get on with it. And so my mum was like not allowed to stay and watch me swim in the early days. So that's kind of my first earliest memory. The next one is that my first ever competitions were club champs. That's when you just have a mini, very casual competition with the rest of your club that you swim with, that you're learning with. And we were having club champs, the first ever time I'd done a race. And because I was so used to lessons being, you swam a width, and then everybody else, you know, would finish, and then the coach would talk to us, and then we'd do another width. And the races were 2 widths. And I was so used to waiting for everybody that I swam 1 width, and I waited for everybody to finish. And my parents were on the side going nuts, like, go, 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 it's 2 widths at 2 widths. But I wanted to wait for everybody to catch up before I started my second width. And that's what it was like, you know, from day dot, I was faster than everybody else. I was steaming through. I was always the youngest. You know, I got moved very young from widths to lengths, and everyone was really cross about it. Why is this baby in our lengths group? And I worked my way up very, very quickly. So another question I got along this lines was, what age did I start? So I started just swimming lessons, like normal, learning to swim, learning the strokes lessons when I was 4. I was very, like I said, I was standing out at a very young age. I actually started competing illegally before I was, strictly speaking, allowed to. So I think back in those days, things are very different now with ages and things like that. But in those days, the youngest age that you were allowed to do races in really sort of low-level galas was 9 to 10. That was the youngest age group. And I was representing my club when I was like 7, 8. I was doing these races, and I was told every gala, if someone asked you how old you are, you must say 9. You must say 9. If someone asks you how old you are, you need to say 9, because my club wanted me racing for them, and I was winning those races, but I was actually years younger than I was even allowed to be in those competitions. So already at the age sort of 7, 8, I was winning races and doing competitions. And at age 10, I think, I did my first nationals, and that was just a relay. So I was in the 11-12 relay, and I was allowed to be 10. It was like the ages go, you know, in the year or whatever. So I was allowed to be 10, but I was 10 years old when I did my first ever national competition, just in a relay. I was not allowed to do individuals, but as soon as I was old enough, I was competing in everything. And it was a big shock because I came from this really tiny, small club. You know, they realized sort of by accident, oh, she's got her county qualifying times. So I went to the counties. By the way, for Americans, counties are like the equivalent to your states, if that makes sense. So I went to my first counties, and I won everything. And it was, who on earth is this person from this tiny club? She's winning counties. Then I got my regional qualifying times, and I went and won there. And then I got my national qualifying times, and everything was like a big shock. It was very much like an accidental thing. My dad was sporty. My dad played football and did a lot of sport, cricket, golf, but no one in my family was a swimmer. So it was all brand new to us. So Tracy says, looks like you swam butterfly. Is that correct? That was based on this photo. No, it's not correct, Tracy. This is breaststroke. I was a breaststroker. My specialist event was 50 breaststroke. I was a sprinter, out and out sprinter, and my best event was 50 breaststroke. But unfortunately, 50 meters breaststroke is not currently as yet an Olympic event. It is everywhere else, world champs, European champs, Commonwealth Games. It is everywhere except for the Olympic Games, where they only have 50-meter freestyle. So that was the bane of my existence and career, really, because 100-meter breaststroke was a bit too far for me. My 50-meter time was so much faster than my 100-meter time, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. But I was an out-and-out breaststroke sprinter. I was county champion in front crawl as well, 50 and 100-meter freestyle. So I did do a lot of relays for freestyle, but my heart was breaststroke. All I ever wanted to do was breaststroke. And so I kind of was like forced into doing freestyle at times, but all I wanted to do was breaststroke. So next I had a lot of questions around like my diet, the schedule, the timing of all of that sort of technical stuff. How many hours of training did I do each week? So when I started, like as a little one, I was only doing, you know, a couple, I think I did 3 sessions that were probably like an hour and a half a week, up to sort of when I moved clubs. So when I was aged, I think about 10 maybe, I moved to a slightly bigger club, still a very small club by the scheme of things, but a slightly bigger club than the one that I started at. And there I started doing a bit more. At the peak of my training, when I was part of like the GB training setup, I was doing two-hour sessions a day, every day in the week. So Monday to Friday, two-hour pool sessions. And then there'd be usually one on a Sunday. Saturday typically was racing. So that's what, 5, 6. So it would be sort of 24 hours of actual pool water time and then land training. So that would be usually an hour after morning training. I would train 6 till 8 in the morning, then do an hour of land training, then go home and rest. And then I'd do a 4 till 6 session in the evening, go to bed. That was kind of the majority of my life when I was full-time training. So as far as like physical hours of training, you're looking at a minimum of 30 hours. And bear in mind that I was a sprinter. So I was doing less pool time than someone whose best event is, you know, a 200-400, God forbid, a 1500 freestyle. Those swimmers do more hours, do more lengths, do more meters. Diet-wise, the majority of my swimming career, there really was no diet. I mean, obviously I wasn't sort of out eating sweets and I didn't drink alcohol really at all. So we get 2 weeks off typically after the biggest event of the year, which is usually in the summer. You would get a 2-week break, and during that 2-week break, swimmers go wild, okay? The swimmers have the reputation they have because we get a very small window and we use it. So that's the sort of break that you're talking about when you do whatever you want. The rest of the time, it's just carbs. Carbs all the time. 4 hours of swimming, that's a lot of calories burned. You can eat as much as you want, you'll never put any weight on because it's a huge amount of calories being burnt all of the time. So really our instructions were just to eat as many carbs as you could. We had a lot of cereals, a lot of pasta, a lot of pizza, carb loading all of the time. There's definitely been a lot more sort of research in that area now, and diet and nutrition across the board in sport is much more understood and much more refined. But when I was swimming, you know, we're talking, my career ended almost 20 years ago now, and back in those days it was just eat as much as you can to get through the day. Tamba Cat had this really interesting question: what aspect of training did I hate the most? So for me, the sessions that I hated the most in the pool were the VO2 max sessions. I don't know really how to explain this, but for a sprinter, this was absolute, utter, unbridled hell, okay? These sessions looked something like, you know, you do your warm up and then the main course set would be something like, for me being a sprinter, 10 lots of 100 meters max breaststroke off something like at 3 minutes. So when I say off 3 minutes, I would be repping something like 1:15 for those hundreds, right? And you would get the rest of the 3 minutes, including that 1:15 max swim, to rest. So maybe like a minute and a bit of rest before you do it again 10 times. I can physically feel the pain now. I mean, from the first, second rep, certainly, your body would be in pretty deep pain all over, lungs burning, every muscle in your body on fire, and you've got 8 to go. The pain is definitely, you know, close second to childbirth when I think about some of those sets and some of those sessions over the years. Utter horror, okay? Horrifying. Still thinking about it now, it's making me sweat a little bit. So Lindsay asked what level I competed at. So I competed at international level. As a junior, what happened to me is that while I was still with my small Devon club, I was selected for my first England junior team. So as a junior, I was a year younger than the age. So I think it was 15, 16-year-old girls and 17, 18-year-old boys. So I was a 15-year-old girl when I was chosen for my first England team. And so when you go and you swim for England or Team GB, you won't usually have your regular coach. If you're from a very big club, they might be chosen to be like the England coach. But I went and I didn't have my coach, and you get assigned a coach who's there to support you throughout the meet. And there I met my coach, Dave. So Dave was my coach for the meet, and he came from a very big, very successful club, and he was part of like the Team GB coaching setup. And during that meet, he was, you know, taking my times in training, and he was saying, what's going on here? Because you're like splits. So he was timing me over 15, 20 meters and was saying these are the fastest splits I've ever seen for a breaststroker, female breaststroker, 15 to 20 to 25 meters. You're flying, but I've never seen someone die, and that means like fade terribly, over a 50 meters breaststroke before, and you're fading so bad. I've never seen anything like it. And so we were chatting, we were talking about how I came from this really small club. He asked me a bit about my training, and he basically worked out that I had done nowhere near enough meters. I was not doing enough training. I was not doing enough aerobic sets and training, and I wasn't doing enough hours, and that's why my 100 meters was so much worse than my 50 meters. And he was like, you need to fix that. Your speed is unbelievable, but we need to fix this back end, because 50-meter breaststroke isn't at the Olympics. If you want to go to an Olympics, you need to make it to 100 much quicker than you're currently doing. So he invited me to come and train with his squad, like on a Sunday every week. I was still at school. I was only, like I said, 14, 15. And so I started doing that, and I quickly realized this is what I want to do. I need to be focusing on this. So my whole family moved me to Bath from Devon so that I could pursue my swimming and be at a bigger club where they were really going to work on my weaknesses and really work hugely on my fitness and my stamina, which was what was massively going wrong for me at that time. So that's what we did. When we talk about sacrifice, you know, my family left our home where we'd lived almost my entire life, and we moved counties away for my swimming. So it was a lot. So initially I started training with the age group squad at Bath because I needed to do age group training. Although I was competing at like an international level, I was missing this years and years of training that age groupers do that I had never done properly. So I was put in with the age group squad to really massively do all of this aerobic fitness and stamina building training, and that's what I did for like a year with my coach Amanda, and that was absolutely my like transformational year. We had a huge year. I started off very scared to go out fast enough because my 50 was so fast and my back end was so poor. My second 50 was so bad. I was always in agony and dying and just trying to make it to the end of the race because I was so unfit. I then had this like psychological barrier that I needed to deal with because I was thinking in my head, I have to go out really slowly or I won't make it back. And I kept doing that. And I really had to like retrain my whole body to know that I could go out much, much faster now and I'd be able to come back. So it took a whole year of building up that stamina and really working on that and really relearning how to race with this newfound like fitness that I had. So Caroline asks, what was your best experience? So I think for me, when I think about like my best memory, my best experience, it was undoubtedly the time that I spent with my dad. I feel like for so many teenage girls, you know, when you hit sort of 15, 16, there's probably not many teenage girls who spend a huge amount of one-on-one time with their dads. And I spent hours traveling to every end of the earth. Even when I was, you know, going up to Bath once a week on a Sunday, my dad would drive me. We'd be a couple of hours in the car there and back. He was every single meet ever. He took me everywhere. We'd stay in these little travel lodges all over the whole country, going to every single meet, every single weekend. Just me and my dad once my sister had gone to university. And I just spent so much time just one-on-one with my dad. You know, his whole life was me and my swimming, and my whole life was him and my swimming. And so I feel like that is just priceless, regardless of whether or not it worked out how I would have wanted it to. That is priceless. Those, you know, memories and all of that special one-to-one time and him supporting me and picking me up and looking after me and consoling me and pushing me and encouraging me and all of that stuff is absolutely priceless. And that's why we say, you know, sport, regardless of what the end goal is, you get so much more out of it. Whether you win, lose or draw, that's like the least of, you know, what's on offer. Renata asked for my times. So while I don't remember exactly my PBs or anything like that now, please bear in mind, this is 20 years ago, okay? So my best 50-meter time was a 32, I think. And my best 100-meter time that I can remember was a 69, so a 1 minute 9. That was my 100-meter PB. So you can see a massive drop off between my 50 and my 100. To make it relative, quite a lot of the time throughout my kind of the peak of my career, my 50-meter time was like top 10 in the world. My 100-meter time was like scraping a final at nationals. Towards the end, at my peak, when I was at my most successful, I was medaling at nationals, so I was a national medalist over 100 meters, and my 50, like I said, would have been a final at an Olympic. Had it have been an Olympic event, was my 100, I never actually qualified for an Olympics, so my 100 just never quite caught up to my 50. But those times are 20 years old now, so things have definitely moved on quite a lot. Letitia asks what the hardest thing was while swimming. So obviously you know about how hard the work is, the sacrifice, you never get to see your friends or go to sleepovers or parties. You miss out on literally everything. So I guess a lot of it is the loneliness. You know, it's not a sort of team sport. You do relays at events, but all of the training, all of the work is done in a pool with your eyes on the bottom of the pool, following that black line up and down. I know Rebecca Adlington actually spoke about this when she was commentating on this year's Olympic Games, about why we see swimmers struggling with mental health. So it seems to be really common, particularly in swimmers. It's the loneliest sport. There are other sports that are equally as lonely. I used to be so jealous of the track athletes. You know, we'd see them sometimes when we were warming up, and their rest periods, they're hanging around, they're chatting. You know, they're with each other all the time. In the pool, you are alone. You can't speak, you'll drown. There's no speaking, there's no chatting, there's no talking. And obviously you make that whole family around you when you're training to that level, that degree, and that amount of time. Everybody in your life is swimming. All of your friends are swimmers, and you do spend all of your lives together. But when you're training, you can't speak to anyone else. You're just sort of in your own bubble all of the time, and it's mega lonely. In this country, you don't see daylight for months on end. You know, you get up while it's still dark, you do hours of training, then you go home, you probably sleep a lot of the day, then you're back in the pool. By the time you come back out, it's dark again. It's a very lonely, tough space. It's huge amounts of training. You're wet and cold the entire time. So it's the loneliness. I think that is the toughest thing specifically about swimming as a sport. So now we're going to talk about the emotional bit. I've got my tissues ready. This is the bit that I think I'll find hard, is talking about my retirement, but the end of my career, because it was not sunshine and roses, going out on a high that you dream of. You know, very, very few athletes. You know, my job after I quit swimming, working with sport, working with elite athletes, is all about supporting athletes as they transition from their sport, their career, all they've known their whole life, into like the real world and jobs and all of that stuff. It's so rare that any athlete has this sort of glittering, perfect, beautiful end to their career where they've achieved everything they could ever possibly hope to, and they're just choosing, it's time for me, I want to do something else, I want to move on. That happens like 1% of the time. The rest of the time, it's usually very painful, very brutal, before you would like it to happen, for some heartbreaking reason, and that was definitely the case for me. So Chizia says, how was retiring? How did you handle it? The short answer is it was brutal, like I just touched on there. So what happened for me is, when I moved from Devon to Bath, I started training with my coach Amanda, who I adored, and we had such a special, successful relationship. Like I said, that year was my transformational year, where I went from a club swimmer who had a phenomenal turn of speed over 50 meters to having a realistic goal of getting to an Olympic Games. And that was what I was working towards. And me and Amanda, we felt like we could do it. You know, we had a year to go to Athens, and it felt like, with the trajectory I was on, it was within potential dreaming grasp for me to achieve that. And then what happened is, my coach had to move. She relocated. She met her partner. She was getting married, and so she was moving to be with her husband. somewhere else. So we had this heartbreaking talk where she broke this horrifying news to me, and she offered for me to go with her. We had a really special relationship. She said, come with me, you know, you can live with me, you can go to school here, you can train with me at this club. But I couldn't do it. I had just moved my whole family from Devon to Bath to train here at this club. And I just didn't feel like I could then go back and do that again to my family. So I was like, no, I can't go. I've got to stay at this club. So at that point, we made the decision, although my coaching relationship with Amanda was so good and it was going so well, that I was going to move from training with her in the age group squad to joining the Team GB training setup. So in this country, we have like training groups dotted across the country that are part of the Team GB setup. So you have Team GB coaches and you get selected to train as part of that group, who are all, you know, Team GB British swimmers basically. So I was going to, in the same club, same pool, but just training with a different coach. That's what I was going to do. I was going to be part of the Team GB setup. That's what I was going to do. And that's where everything for me started to go wrong. So I was moved to train with a very successful, very good coach, but just a coach that was not a good fit for me. The training group was not a good fit for me. Everybody else in the group was more of like a 200-meter breaststroker, and I was an out and out sprinter, and I was still very much on this journey of building my stamina and back end up, but I was still a sprinter. And I had very much like a sort of motherly relationship with Amanda, my age group coach. And so we went into the GB setup, and it was very, you know, the coach there was very sort of cold and also very technical. So he went on this mission to like fix my stroke. And there was a bit of a language barrier there. He was giving me about 15 different things at a time that I needed to change about my stroke, until my head was just mush and I just didn't even know how to swim breaststroke anymore. Everything was sort of torn to pieces. I was, you know, told I needed to be flatter. I need my hands to be closer to the surface. I need to change my hand shape. I need to change my kick. We need to work on this. And it was so much at once that my stroke just fell apart. And being part of the Team GB setup, we also started trialing 3 sessions a day. So I was doing something like 6 hours in the pool. I also was told at that time I needed to drop about 5 kilos, which I know will sound really jarring if you're not in sport, but I want to be clear, I had no issue with that at all. It's very much a factual conversation, and it's something that's very common in sport. It's not like being told, like, you know, in a normal working life that you're overweight, you need to lose weight. It's very much an equation, a mass to power ratio. This is your ideal weight. And it's not, for me, it certainly didn't feel, you know, hard or something that was really upsetting or really traumatizing. I was just like, cool, okay. It didn't mean anything to me. It certainly wasn't something that was a big deal for me at the time. It's very common. I was being weighed every day, and again, that's very common, very normal in sport. And so I was losing a bit of weight. I was training 6 hours in the pool every day, and I was just falling to pieces. So this was the year going into what should have been the Olympics that I was hoping to try and qualify for. I just ended up being completely fatigued beyond being able to exist. I got more and more ill, and I ended up being diagnosed with chronic fatigue. I could literally not walk from the sofa to my bed. I remember my mum having to like support me to be able to get from the sofa to my bed. All I could do is sleep almost all the time. I'd turn up to the pool and I could barely do the warm up. I just lost all physical capability of doing anything, and I could just see everything falling apart. My times were getting worse and worse and worse and slower, and I didn't really have any support in that time. I did have it at home. I had it from my friends and my family, of course, but as far as like in the pool, nothing was kind of being done to help me or to understand what was going on. It was just like everyone just thought I overnight got rubbish at swimming, and no one really tried to sort of look into and help me and give me advice. What do I need to do? It was just like, do you want to rest? Do you want some time off? Do you want to carry on? And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't have a relationship with my coach any longer. You know, I barely felt like I could speak to him at all. So I was very alone, and I chose to go back to my original coach, Dave, who was the coach who I met on my first England team, and train with him instead, which was a much better fit for me, but wasn't resolving the massive issue that we now had, that I was miles behind where I needed to be. My stroke had gone to hell because it had been all muddled and I was so confused and I didn't understand what was wanted of me. So my stroke had gone to hell. I was completely fatigued. So I think I just took a couple of weeks off and then we got back into training. But I was miles away from where I had been and where I needed to be at this point. And so by the time we got to nationals, I shouldn't really have even gone, but I did because it was Olympic qualifying and I, you know, who knows? You never know what's going to happen. I went, I don't think I even made the final. I think I missed the final. I think I might have come like 9th, and so I didn't make the final. And that was the beginning of the end. My heart was so broken and ripped into pieces. And I had come to hate training and the pool and swimming so much that there was really nowhere to go from here. So it took me months after nationals, and that was Olympic trials, where obviously I did not qualify or even come close to qualifying, to go to the Olympics that had been my dream and my goal. So I went away and had a little bit of time off, but I did not feel able to say I'm done. I went back to training and I tried a few different things. I spoke to a few different people and I just sort of decided I was going to try and coach myself, and I was going to, you know, work on getting back to my stroke and work on sprinting again. But my heart was just in pieces and I just couldn't do it. I was turning up to the pool every day, and some days I'd get in, I'd do warm up, and I couldn't make myself do anything else. I was so broken. I literally didn't have it in me to swim. I was just paddling up and down, lost, and I'd be crying into my goggles. I remember, like, no one can see you cry in the water, so that's convenient at times, but I would take my goggles off and they'd be full because I was just swimming along crying my eyes out. And it got worse and worse till I remember vividly one day I got onto poolside, and the pool, you know, during GB training time, there's no spectators in there. So the whole of the sort of seating gallery is just empty and we all just get changed there. And so I had come out with all the other swimmers, everyone was getting changed, and I just sat in the seat and I literally physically couldn't even get myself to get dressed. It got worse and worse until I couldn't even put a swimming costume on. I just was sat there thinking, I don't want to put my costume on. I can't even get changed. And it was from heartbreak, real, desperately heartbroken and lost. And Dave, my coach, I've never said this to him. I don't even know if he remembers this conversation, but I remember this for forever. So he came up and he sat next to me and he spoke about what was going on, what's wrong, what can he do. We talked about that. And I told him like how unhappy I was and how much, like how sad I was and how much I hate it. I can't even bring myself to put my swimming costume on. What do? I felt like I was letting everybody down. I knew this would happen. This is why I didn't do this as a get ready with me. I felt like, you know, my parents had given up everything and moved me here for my dream, and they've done so much and put so much money in and so much time and effort and everything else into this, and I just can't do it anymore, and I've let everyone down, and I felt like I had to carry on and do something that made it all worth it, you know? I think I just felt like unless I made it to the Olympics one way or another, it was all for nothing. That's how I was feeling. Like I had to do that, even though I was hating and I was so miserable and so unhappy. I can't give up now, or it was all for nothing. I'd achieved nothing in my head in that space. That's where I was at. And at the perfect right moment, in the perfect words, he basically said to me, do you know you don't have to do this anymore? Do you know you don't have to get in? You don't have to swim. You don't have to keep doing this to yourself anymore. Do you know that that is an option? Is basically what he said to me. And it was the first time anyone had ever said, you don't have to. You know, I was telling him how miserable, how much I hated it, how I just can't do it. And it was just, I just needed someone to physically say to me, you don't have to. You don't have to. No one's making you. No one cares. And I said to him, you know, my parents, I feel like I can never say to them, I'm quitting, I'm giving up. I feel like they'll be so disappointed and devastated. And he said, no, they won't. They won't. You don't have to do this anymore. They don't have to do this. It's you that's having to do this. You don't have to do this anymore. They won't. They love you. They want you to be happy. No one's enjoying seeing you like this. So I went home that night and I told them I didn't want to do it anymore. And like he said, they wouldn't. They didn't care. They were sad for me and heartbroken for me that I had sort of, my dream had not come true. But they didn't care. They didn't care. They were not mad at me or disappointed or any of the things that I think I thought in my head they were going to be. They just wanted me to be happy. Crazy, right? So that is kind of the how and the why and everything as with regards to the way that it all went down at the end. As far as how I dealt with it, that was the hard bit, was everything that kind of led up to it. I think once I had said, I'm done, that's it, that was kind of, I was okay then. The saddest bit about it all is that up until that point, you know, I was 21 when I finally pulled the plug, I think, and everything was swimming. My boyfriend at the time, we'd been together for like 4 years. He was a swimmer. We, you know, were together all day, every day of our lives for those 4 years, swimming together. Every person I knew was a swimmer or a coach, you know, or a land coach, nutritionist. Everybody in my life was swimming. And as much as you tell yourself that those people will be in your life for forever and they're your people, when you remove yourself from that environment, you lose them all. You know, everybody else is still training and swimming together, and gradually over time you lose that bond and you lose touch. They're still swimming, so they can't see you at the weekends, and you don't go to swimming events anymore, so you lose everything, your entire life, which is why my job working with athletes and with that transition is so vital. It didn't exist when I retired, sadly, and that's why I'm so aware of how vital that support for athletes is, not just at the end of their career, but ensuring they have a life that doesn't fully revolve around their sport, because when that ends, then it's like your life ends rather than just this little bit of it. So that's how it was for me. I lost everybody and everything. And it was really hard and really sad, and it took a long time to rebuild and even know what on earth I wanted to do with my life right now, because what I didn't want to do was be anywhere near a swimming pool. I did not want to coach. I did not want to be involved in swimming at all. I wanted to get as far away from it as physically, humanly possible, and I didn't go near a swimming pool, look at a swimming pool, or go into a swimming related building for years and years later. So this was a really, really good question from Vic CC8. Something I've learned as I chose to not continue with swimming. Such a great question. So for me, I think it's that lesson that came at the end that is so important, that it's okay to let go of something that no longer serves you. It's okay. And it happens to us all the time, not necessarily that you're involved in sport or in swimming or anything like that, but in life in general, whether it's a job or a person or a partner or a family member, that it is okay to say enough is enough. It is okay to move on from something that you once loved and meant so much to you that no longer does, that hurts you more than it serves you, that gives you more pain than it does joy. It's okay to say, this no longer serves me and I'm going to change it. Okay, so now that horrible, awful bit is over with, there's some really fun sort of random questions here that weren't necessarily about like sort of my swimming journey that I want to answer. So this first one is very funny, from Anne Carney Rains. Do swimmers pee in the pool during training? This is going to horrify some of you, but I feel like if you look deep into your soul, you're going to know the answer. If I've just told you that some swimmers are in the water for 3 hours of a training session, and you must drink a good couple of these because you get so hydrated and you lose so much fluid while training at that level for that amount of time, you do the maths. No, you're not allowed to get out and go to the toilet during training sessions. You're not allowed to miss lengths. So yes, I guarantee you all swimmers who are training at a certain level, you know, maybe in like club, lower level clubs, they'll let you get out to go to the toilet. But I promise you, any swimmers who are at a certain level of training for hours in a session, not allowed to get out, drinking litres and litres of water, I promise you they're all peeing in the pool. And anyone who tells you they aren't is a liar. But don't be too horrified by it, because that is specifically the reason why all the chemicals are in the pool. And swimmers are the most hydrated people you could ever meet. So I will say that their urine is basically water. Very, very clear, very, very hydrated people. However, yes, I do understand why people will think that was disgusting, but it is a fact, I promise you. So Iona asked what the best age is to start considering for my children. So when it comes to sort of learning to swim, like forget competing or, you know, being an Olympian or anything like that, the best time for your children to learn to swim for safety reasons is as early as possible. Both my children started baby swimming from like the time I was allowed. So it's your 6-week check here that you're cleared to do things like exercise and swimming. And I immediately started both of them in like newborn baby swimming lessons, which aren't really teaching swimming. They're more so teaching them to be confident and happy in the water. And both of them they now are doing, you know, proper club swimming lessons. I started proper lessons when I was about 4. Like I said, the earlier the better. You know, like with anything, the younger children are, the more sponge-like they are, the quicker they can pick things up, and the more natural things will be for them, the less scary things will be for them. So for me, it's vital as a safety to get your kids in and swimming, and everything else will just naturally develop. If they happen to be phenomenally good and talented at it, that will come, and your club will support you with that. I would say if your children are in secondary school and they are not a part of a, you know, club that are doing, you know, a good number of sessions per week already, it may sound crazy, but with regards to swimming, it's too late. Swimming is a really young sport, and you need to have done a certain amount of training and meters and stroke work at a young enough age to be on like a sort of serious trajectory to be able to really be competitive at a decent level. You know, it's a similar sort of age, slightly older sport than like gymnastics, but it is still a sport where age and starting really early and young and getting a lot of meters in when you're younger is vital. I also got a few questions about how I'd feel about my children pursuing high level sport, or like especially swimming. So I would love my children to be swimmers. I think it's amazing for your health, for your fitness, for certainly water safety, but both my children are absolutely safe in water at this point. You know, they both can do a full training session every stroke. In the water, they're very confident swimmers. My son is phenomenally gifted natural talent swimming, but the only thing he could care less about is football, which is very sad for me, but that's what he enjoys. And that's a sport that I feel a lot less happy about him pursuing at that level for various different reasons, but the way that young footballers are treated and all of those issues around footballers and support and all of that, I don't love and I'm not super happy about. But for me, everything with sport must come from the child. So they must love it, they must enjoy it, they must want to chase after it. Otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of time and energy and make each other all very unhappy. So for me, that's what he loves. He wants to play football, so that's what he's doing. My daughter loves swimming a lot more, but she also prefers dance and gymnastics. So as much as she loves going to swimming and she's doing it, it's not like her chosen sport. Either of them wanting to pursue high level sport, I would never stop them from doing it if they wanted to, but I also would not ever sort of push them to do it, because so much comes with it. It's so brutal, and it's literally 1% of people that get to achieve their dreams, whether it's going to an Olympics or a World Cup or being a professional footballer. It's it's so tough, and it's very unforgiving, and it's brutal, and for the vast majority of people it's unsuccessful. So I'd never sort of push them into doing that, but I do think sport, particularly competitive sport, has so much good and lessons and life lessons that it teaches you, as well as the quality of time, the discipline, things like independence. You know, you travel a lot without your parents as a child in high level sport. You get on buses, you have to know times and enter, and you have to get yourself up to a block and know what lane and what race and what heat you're in and what time, and do your warm up and do this. And it teaches you responsibility and ownership, as well as work ethic and all of that stuff. So there's so much good about it. But if your heart's not in it and you don't really want it, don't push it, because it will never work out for anybody. How has sport changed? So this is really interesting. The biggest change that I've noticed from going from being a high performance athlete 20 years ago to then working in the elite Olympic sport field 20 years later, the biggest change, well, there's a couple of huge changes for me. One is the money. The money is a million miles further along than it was back in my day. There was never really serious, consistent funding that went into athletes in my day. These days, you can certainly receive funding that's the equivalent of a very good full-time job, and you don't pay tax. I don't know what other countries do, but here in the UK, it's tax-free reward that funds athletes at a high level. You have to be, you know, an Olympic finalist level to receive that, but it's a really good amount of money to support an athlete's life while they're training. So there's a lot more support for athletes, whether it's from someone like myself supporting athletes in their lifestyle, their work, their personal development and education, or whether it's financial support. There's a huge amount more support. I've also noticed that athletes are far more involved in their own training. Back in my day, and I think swimming is still very much like this in general, but you turn up to training at the time you're told, and you get told exactly what you're going to do. You don't ask questions, you just do it. Your coach tells you what to do and you do it. It's literally monkey say, monkey do. That's how it worked. These days, it's so much more common for athletes to want to understand what they're doing and why, and to be involved in the conversation. I still think for swimming, it's still very much a coached sport and a coach-led sport. But in a lot of the other sports that I've worked with, it's much more common for athletes to check and challenge and to question and to want to be involved and control some of their training, which was unheard of in my day. So I think athletes have a lot more say and a lot more control and input, and they also have a wild amount more support than they did back in my day. And it's only been, like I said, 20 years. It's crazy. A very fast moving and changing, evolving field for sure. I also got asked quite a lot about skincare and hair care. Now, let me tell you, I did nothing. Okay, you know, you have to understand that through the body of my career, I was a teenager to like 21. My skin was perfect. I barely showed it a moisturizer on occasion, and I never had any issues with my skin. I wasn't wearing makeup that entire period of life because I spent it almost all entirely in the pool. So very rarely wore makeup, but also was not doing any kind of skincare routine, okay? And my skin was obviously very dry and parched all the time. So I'd moisturize, but that was literally about it. I also was in my full bleach phase, in my really bleached white era during my swimming, which is the worst possible thing you can do for hair that's being like sheep dipped in chlorine 24 plus hours a week. I decided to add a load of bleach to that equation. Now, my hair never went green, but it was for sure extremely dry and in desperate need of some care and attention, which I just didn't give it. I just kept on cutting it off and bleaching it more. So my hair's a lot healthier now than it was then. But I didn't do anything to take care of my hair or my skin during any of that time. I didn't care about anything other than swimming. So yeah. I don't have any help or tips for you because I did nothing, and being, 15, 16, got away with it. So I was also asked quite a lot if I swim now. I really don't. I still have a very reluctant relationship with swimming pools, with getting in a pool. I get in the pool with my children to play occasionally, but I really still, it's very raw 20 years later, it's still a sensitive, sore environment for me. I still feel sad and have just a delicate relationship with swimming pools. So I slightly miss just plodding up and down a little bit, and perhaps that's something that I need to think about in the future, perhaps revisiting. But it's taken a long time for me to even want to go anywhere near a swimming pool, to smell the chlorine, to in any way watch swimming, you know, meets and things. That's still quite raw. To watch Olympic swimming, I always do, because I'm obviously obsessed with it and I of course want to keep up with it, but it's still always a little raw, a little sore, a little sensitive. So not something I still do currently, but maybe I would like to dip a toe back in one day soon. This is funny. So Letitia asked if it was easy for me to do the flipping. I'm thinking we're talking about tumble turns here. Is that correct? The only flipping I can think of that I did. So no, it wasn't easy. I did learn tumble turns when I was like, I don't know, probably like 6 or 7. And I was the last person to get them right. I remember really clearly my coach having to get in the pool, in the water with me and do them over and over again after everybody else had gone home, because I was so useless at picking it up, and he stayed and got in the pool and was physically doing turns with me over and over and over again until I got it right. I was the last person in the group to get a tumble turn. Now I can do them perfectly, and I'm helping my children learn tumble turns like really quick now, but I was not the quickest to get them. It took me longer than everybody else. So Alma has asked me, what are you most proud of in your swimming career? And this is really interesting. Thank you for this question, because it's interesting. When I sort of thought about this, I feel like my answer is so not what you would think, not what I necessarily would think. So I had, you know, a nationals, and I was kind of at the peak of my most successful year in swimming. There was a national, so British Championships, where I came away with I think 3 golds, 4 silvers and a bronze. The reason I had so many is because there were some relays in there, and all of the golds were relays. I got silver in all of my individual events, and it was one where there was senior and an open category, so that's why I got double of everything. Got, you know, silver in the 50 in my age group, and then silver in the 50 overall, same in the 100, and then I got this bronze, and that bronze is the single most proudest achievement of my entire career, even though the colour of it is not a gold or a silver, and obviously I had many more golds and silvers over the years, but that bronze was in the 200 meters breaststroke, okay, which I didn't even race until I went to Bath and trained with Amanda. I would say I don't want to do 200. I'm a sprinter. I'm not doing 200 breaststroke. I hated it. It's too far. I was useless at it. But that year, after all of that training and all of that work on my second half of my 100 meters, my coach Amanda was making me race 200s because she said it would be good for my 100. So I was forced to do 200s against my will, and I hated them. I used to have like panic attacks. I used to think I was going to lose count, because in a short course pool, that's 8 lengths. And I thought, I'm going to do too many lengths, I'm going to do too few. And I was terrified that I was like it was going to be too hard. I wouldn't even be able to finish the race. And then I got to nationals that year and got a bronze in the 200 meters breaststroke. And that for me was such a huge achievement, given that I was such a sprinter. But the work I'd done that year had been so much that not only was I now competing in 200s, but I got a bronze at nationals in the 200 meters breaststroke, which was unreal. And I'm actually far prouder of that bronze than I am of any of my other silvers and golds that I got throughout the years, because it just was such a symbol of the work that I'd done and it paying off. So weirdly, that random bronze medal is the thing I'm most proud of about my entire swimming career. Itinerant Islander said, how do you stay calm when you have to tread water as I panic? So this is really not a fair question for me, because obviously I am completely at home and comfortable in the water. And I don't even, you know, if I was to get in the water, I have such good control and like feel of like my body in water that I don't have to tread water. I can literally just sort of float in water, and I can hold my body still in water and be completely calm, because I'm so comfortable in that environment, which obviously if you're not, it's a very different thing. you know, comfort in water is all about getting used to it and adjusting to it and getting much more familiar and spending much more time in water and becoming comfortable in it. Because if it's something that's a bit alien to you, that you've never really done a lot of lessons or a lot of time, spend a lot of time in a pool or in and around water, you really just, the only way to improve that is spending more and more time there and becoming far more familiar and comfortable in that environment. For me, it's like breathing, but obviously it's not the same for everybody. So the only way to get comfortable, I'm afraid, is to keep at it, keep putting yourself in water and becoming more familiar with the feeling and the sensation, the control of your body in that environment, in a controlled, comfortable environment, maybe in the shallow end where you know you can stand up at any time or you can touch the wall at any time, and just spend more and more time there and it will come. And then Eva asks, is there something about having a career in sport that normies just don't understand? It's really interesting to me because having spent my entire life either as an elite athlete or working with elite athletes in the Olympic environment, everything about sport to me is like so second nature, and I know so much, and obviously all of the things that I know about coaching and training and the gym and nutrition and all of that stuff is just second nature to me. And I'm always shocked actually at how little other people know or understand or care about when it comes to Olympic sport and the environment and everything, all of the ins and outs. I think the number one thing that I find when talking to someone who knows nothing about sport at all, or elite sport or the Olympics, is that people have no idea is how difficult and rare it actually is to reach like the absolute peak or pinnacle of success within Olympic sport. I know, for example, a great example of this is my nana. So when I visited my nana just after I had gone to Olympic trials and completely flopped it, and I went to visit my nana and had said, and she said, you know, oh, are you going to go to the Olympics? And I said no, and she said, why not? And I said, well, I wasn't good enough. I didn't get picked. And she was outraged, and she literally couldn't understand how, but you have done all of this work and you've worked so hard, why won't they let you go? And she literally just thought, if you like want to go and you work quite hard at it, you go. And that's kind of how she thought it worked. And she was actually, bless her, so angry and upset, like she wanted to call someone up. This is not fair, you've worked so hard. And it's just, that's just sadly not how it works. I think a lot of people who aren't involved in sport think that if you work really, really hard and you want to go to an Olympics, you can. And that's just not how it works. You know, thousands and thousands and thousands of people in this country alone work very, very hard and do the same number of training and, you know, put their absolute max effort in their entire life for years and years and years into training. And they will never even make, you know, an international team, let alone qualify for an Olympic Games. It's literally the 1% who have the perfect work ethic, natural ingrained talent, support team, coaching, journey, luck with things like illness and injury, and right place, right time, peaking, all of that stuff. It's such a rarity in sport to actually go to an Olympics, let alone be a finalist, be a medalist. Any of that stuff is so rare, and it's not just a case of working really, really hard and you get it. One of the reasons why sport is so brutal, it's cruel, it's unfair. It's like the worst, most toxic relationship you can imagine. It cheats on you, it rewards other people, treats other people better than it treated you, it gives the wrong people success, or sometimes it feels that way, that, you know, it's easier for some people than others. Some people have more natural talent than others. Some people have a better wingspan or longer limb length or bigger hands and feet and all these natural, you know, things that help you be better. And I knew some swimmers who were really flipping lazy. There's a couple of swimmers, obviously I won't say their names, that I've trained with over the years who were far more successful than me, who did go to Olympic Games, who made Olympic finals, who I promise you did not want it as much as I did, didn't really even care that much a lot of the time, and definitely didn't work as hard as I did. They had far more natural, like inherent talent and ability than I did. So no matter how hard I worked or how much harder I might have worked than them, I would never have been more successful because they had a lot more natural physicality and talent and just gift for it than me. You know, I think a lot of people will say, oh, you know, sport is fair. It needs to be fair. It needs to be a level playing field. Sport has never been fair and it will never be fair. It's just not something that is fair, and nor should it necessarily be. Everybody has their own little different advantages, whether it be, you know, your muscle makeup, like I said, your something like Michael Phelps's wingspan or Ian Thorpe's giant flipper feet, or your height or your build, or even the location that you were born in. All of these things affect how successful you could possibly be. And again, I feel like over the years, you know, when every time I've had a chat with my hairdresser about my job, or a random person asks me what I do for a living or what my job is prior to YouTube, you know, whenever anyone said, oh, you were a swimmer, and I'd say yes, and they say, did you go to the Olympics? Are you an Olympian? And that was always like the next question. And I was like, no, not everybody does. Actually, very, very few people do. It's incredibly rare. The literal top 1% that get to do it, it's such an unbelievable, immeasurable achievement to go to an Olympic Games. And I feel like that's something that I see and hear a lot from people who aren't involved in sport, is actually how rare and quite how challenging and difficult it is to achieve that. It's massively underrated. It's just phenomenally hard and rare to be an Olympian. And I feel like outside of the Olympic environment, it's massively underestimated quite how hard and rare it is. Whew, and I think that is everything. I think I've hopefully answered pretty much everybody's questions. I got a little emotional, I won't lie to you, but I feel like I held up a lot better than I thought I was going to. I made it through. And this was tough, you know, this is the sort of stuff I don't talk about very often. It's painful, it's sad, it's not a happy ever after ending that everybody would have wished for. But I feel like my sort of journey is far, far more common than a journey that ends in Olympic champion and wandering off into the sunset. So I feel like it's a much more realistic representation of elite sport and how the vast majority of us never quite achieve our dream goals. It's just not that common. So there you have it. Hopefully this scratched the itch of all of you who were intrigued or wanting to know a bit more. I hopefully have answered everybody's questions. But thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it a bit enlightening. And I would love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye 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 bye.